And hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Pumpkin Copter cast, the only video game show. So today I am joined by veteran PAX goer and person about to release their game this coming summer. I have Patrick who's behind the game Dodo Peak.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. So let's start with the brief introduction of you.
Yeah. So my name's Patrick Magavita. I am a game developer. I'm one of the co-founders of a small games company in New York City called Moving Pieces. We Our first project is Dodo Peak. It's a isometric classic arcade game, kind of a mix of Frogger and Snake. Um, with a little bit of Qbert in there as well. We released our game on Apple Arcade in the fall. We've just been promoting it and adding content updates since then, and then we're coming out on Nintendo Switch this summer.
Okay. And when did you first get into video games?
So my background for the past about 10 years is I've been working as a 3D artist on TV and commercials,
Mm-hmm.
and I wanted to get into games kind of my whole life, really. But Dodo Peak is actually the first game that I've ever commercially released. So I would say basically ever since starting working on Dodo Peak, which is about 2.5 years ago at this point, that's kind of when I started wholly kind of getting into the games industry.
Okay. And what would you say is your favorite game and or games growing up?
Oh, that's a really good question. So we didn't really have a computer early on, so I was definitely a console kid. So, we had Nintendo, and then I kind of went into the Sega realm. Um, I had a brother growing up, so we played a lot of games together. In terms of like favorite games, oh man, it's really hard to say. Probably like my favorite games growing up are like games that I could play with friends, like multiplayer games,
Mm-hmm.
which like didn't really exist until I was probably in like middle school. But like obviously like GoldenEye, it's like amazing, really fun. Like before that, I played all the classics like Castlevania. Really loved playing that, like with my brother. Super Mario, of course. And Yeah, that's kind of this is kind of the games that I kind of grew up playing.
Okay. And what would you say is your favorite game and or games now?
Um, hmm, Another very good question. I probably put the most hours in like multiplayer games, like with friends. Definitely have put a lot of hours into PUBG. I also play like totally a ton of different games. My like probably most like recent favorite game. I'm actually playing Shadow of Colossus now, which is really awesome. Um, and I started playing Horizon Zero Dawn a little bit late to the party there, but that's also a really awesome game. Um, but yeah, I kind of like all genres, like everything. I try to play as many things as I can.
Okay. And now, if this were a PAX or a similar video game convention, and a passersby like came across your booth, like what would be like what would be like the sales pitch you'd give them as to what Dodo Peak is?
Yeah, so Dodo Peak is a classic arcade platformer, but with a bit more of a modern visual style. We kind of like our team, like we're super inspired, like growing up and playing games in the arcades. They're like super approachable, really easy to pick up, but like super fun. You get enjoyment like really quick. So we really liked that methodology. We kind of felt like there were a lot of like classic arcade platformers that like retro is huge, so they a lot of games have that like very like retro look. But kind of with our background being more like visual people, we we decided to make something that was a little bit more modern in like the visual style. So we wanted to take that classic arcade gameplay, mix it with more of like a modern visual style, and that is basically Dodo Peak.
Okay. And like, how would you like if you were just like, sitting with someone talking about your game and you didn't have like at it like in a non-convention setting, like how would you describe how Dodo Peak plays to someone who might, and if you don't have like a tablet or something with a build of the game on hand?
Yeah, so it basically plays. It's like very similar to like if you could imagine like Frogger meets Cubert meets Snake, kind of all those game mechanics put together, and like it's definitely like the best like I think like words to describe it is it's like a classic arcade hop around.
Okay, and like you mentioned isometric, so like I noticed when I was playing it, it's a game of just essentially just like going up and down like stair-like structures really fast. Was it always the idea to make it like a go up and down game, or did it start as more of like a flat surface game like Frogger?
Uh, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we actually initially started. It was kind of the same like structure. Like you have this peak that you kind of move through. But the original layout was more of like a 360. So we had this kind of like 360 camera that like orbited around kind of like this like full like mountainside or like peak. Um, which was cool, but with it, like it was kind of hard to see what was going on, and we had got like some feedback that it like was a little too visually busy. So we kind of like decided to like you could imagine like you have like a whole like circle, right? Like 360 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
Like what we have now is basically just like 90 degrees of the 360, so you can kind of like focus your eye a bit more into like what's happening. So we ended up kind of changing from the original direction into what we have now.
Okay. And where exactly did the idea for Dodo Peak come from? Like, making it so that you're the like Dodo the bird, and you have to just navigate the level in order to retrieve your eggs, and then go back to the beginning of the level in order to actually move on to the next part.
Yeah, I mean, like I think, like I said before, like a lot of this stems, like a lot of our inspiration stems from like classic arcade games. There's another classic arcade game that I actually didn't know about until someone mentioned it to me, called oh man, it's gonna erase my memory now. Congo Bongo, yeah, that's it. So Congo Bongo is kind of a similar kind of game um, to ours in that sense, where it kind of takes place on this. Um, like peak pyramid thing, if you will, and you have to avoid enemies. And I think a lot of like classic arcade games kind of like stem from this same kind of like isometric angle, and it's kind of similar gameplay to a lot of those. So that's kind of where the idea came from for in terms of like the gameplay. The Dodo, I'm not really sure where that came from. I think we just kind of like thought that since it's an extinct animal, we have a little more like creative license. I think the dodo, like in popular culture, people are like kind of there's people that are really interested in it, and just wanted to kind of pick something that we could have a lot of fun with and have like a creative license. So yeah, that's the kind of the basic inspiration idea.
Okay. And you mentioned that in between initially releasing it for Apple Arcade and bringing it to Switch later on this year, that you've been introducing content updates gradually. Like, what exactly are those content updates that will be available in like the current and future ports of the game?
Yeah, so when we released Dodo Peak, we had about 30 levels in like three different worlds. And since then, since we released like last fall, we've shipped two content updates, which basically each add a whole new world with new mechanics and new enemies and about 10 levels. And we've also added a bunch of new different features to the game, more like kind of like minor minor tweaks and improvements, and we're actually going to be releasing our third content update, which again features like a whole new world, 10 new levels, probably any week now, I would say. So we're really excited about that.
Okay. And so, was the idea always to bring Dodo Peak to multiple platforms? And you mentioned that it's coming to Switch. Does it I've been hearing from quite a few other indie developers that for a lot of them, just bringing it to the Switch just kind of made sense, like both in like business wise and just generally. Did you find like the same was the case for you and your team?
Yeah, I mean, I think most developers, the goal is like you just want to get your game into the hands of as many people that want to play it, right? So I think with that in mind, that was, any platform that made sense for us, which I think, Apple Arcade is a really great platform for us, and also Nintendo Switch, too, really makes sense for our game and our audience. So that was kind of always the goal, is just and if it, basically just to get it in the hands of anyone that wants to play it.
Okay, and from like the initial concepts of the idea to like the finished product, how long did it take to fully realize and make and send out into the world? How long did it take for Dodo Peak to become a thing, like total time wise?
Yeah, so we worked on the game for about 2 years, like before it was released. Like I'd say the first like year was a little bit more like part time, and then myself moving into full time, and then probably in the last like 6 months we like kind of ramped up the team a little bit, added a few folks, and then a lot of work happened then, as well. So, but yeah, all in all, it was about 2 years, from start to finish.
Okay. And like during the 2 year process that it took to make Dodo Peak, like what would you say is the most like difficult or just frustrating or just overall like time consuming aspect of the game's development?
I mean, I would say like the last probably like 6 months of the game is like when a lot of the work happened. So that was probably the most like intense period for the team. We did a lot of things then, and also just when you get to ship a game, you gotta, there's a lot of things that you have to deal with and figure out. Then, so that was probably the last like 6 months were the most intense for us for sure.
Okay, and once Dodo Peak is released to the Switch this summer, do you think that'll be just it for the game, or do you intend to do you intend to produce any more like content updates or just any sort of general additions to the game once the Switch port happens?
Yeah, so we definitely want to like continue to support the game into the future. We have some plans in the works for additional some really cool additional new features and whatnot, after the Switch release, but we're kind of still figuring out our roadmap for those and kind of the scope of what those are going to be.
Okay, and has any member of the team expressed an interest in like other types of games or other types of genres of games you'd be interested in dabbling in once everything with Dodo Peak has been sent out into the world?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think all of us have like a pretty eclectic taste for games, so there's yeah, like I think definitely want to work on. I think everybody wants to work on something new in the near future, and I think that we're all excited about, obviously continuing to support Dodo Peak, but also creating new things that we can share with people as well.
All right. And If you had to rate like the game's like overall difficulty, not just like the beginning tutorial-esque levels, but like the very end, like the end game type of stuff, like how would like an average player of games, find the challenge in Dodo Peak?
That's a good question. I mean, I think, I guess I could kind of speak to our intention was that we wanted it to be a game that was like pretty straightforward for most gamers to pick up and play, in terms of like from an accessibility standpoint. Um, so that was definitely our intention. And then, throughout the game, things get a little more challenging for sure, but kind of we structure things where we have six different worlds, and at the beginning of every world, things are a little easier, and then towards the end, they get definitely harder. And then once you get to a new world, things get a little bit easier again. So we kind of give the player a break, and then we kind of ramp up the difficulty again. Um, but that was kind of our intention with it. We wanted to make something that was like easy to pick up and learn, but if you really want to be like, a master at the game, it definitely takes a little bit of some skill and some practice as well.
All right, time for the final question of the game, the interview show that everyone always understands perfectly and there's never been any confusion on. So, Patrick, in your opinion, is video games?
Yes, I mean, I'm not sure what you mean. Maybe you could elaborate a little bit.
Nope.
Okay. Is video games? I guess, I guess you're leaving it open to interpretation.
Yes.
I'm just gonna say yes. Just gonna say is video games, and I'm gonna say yes.
All right then. That brings us to the conclusion of this particular episode of the Pumpkin Copter Cast. I would like to thank Patrick for joining me and helping me helping me do something that will keep me mentally occupied during this time of intense suck.
Yeah,
And
yeah, it was my pleasure, man.
yeah,
Thanks so much for having me on.
and if any of you, if your interest has been piqued in
Nice.
Dodo Peak, as he said, it is available currently on Apple Arcade, and in the summer times it'll be on the Nintendo Switch. So yes, keep your eyes and ears open for it. And if for some reason any of the -7 of you who will listen to this episode like what you heard, you can like and subscribe on the YouTubes and see if I can break triple digit subscription numbers before my hair starts turning white. Um, yeah, if for some really bizarre reason you desire to give me a money, you can go to patreon.com/the Pumpkin Coptercast and give as much and as little as you like. And yeah, if you wanna, if you just want a IV drip of updates for anything Dodo Peak related, you can follow them on the Twitters at Dodo Peak, I believe.
Yep, that's it.
And yeah, this has been the Pumpkin Copter Cast, and as I am obligated to say at the end of every episode, have a gourd day, everyone.